don't need a big garden to have a meadow. In fact, the smaller the garden, the more appropriate a little meadow is, as opposed to some tiny postage stamp of a lawn that, even though it's not big enough to play sports on, is going to require mowing, blowing, and edging, fossil fuels, loud noises, constant maintenance by maintenance crews, where a meadow is a much quieter, much more sympathetic with nature. A lot of my design work in designing meadows is working for other designers. So often when I walk onto the site, hardscape details, pathways have already been laid out. So in this garden where I worked with designer Sarah Stuckey, there was already this gorgeous deck and decomposed granite pathways. So she had created the spaces, but was looking for advice on how to incorporate a meadow into these plantings. When I first walked into the backyard, everybody was talking about, the client, Sarah, were talking about maybe what sorts of colors of grasses and flowers and perennials to use. And I took a look up and I said, well, you know, maybe the elephant in the room is acknowledging the existence of this huge palm tree in the background with this huge explosion of palm fronds. So for me, the choices of grasses I made had everything to do with how they related to the elephant in the room, the Canary Island palm. I loved the fence. I loved Sarah's organization, but then it was my job to help her with the selection of the plants. Should the ground cover grasses should they blend with the greens overhead, or should they contrast? Do we want a bright yellow understory or a dark green understory? I study the area that's going to be a meadow from various angles. I want to see what the meadow looks like from this angle, from that angle, and try to understand how light plays in the garden. Where's the shade? Where's the sun? Where's the sun and shade? And also try to understand in the different seasons. For example, in the winter, the sun will be much lower on the horizon and the shade will go further into the garden on the north side of the house. So we take all of those things into consideration when we're choosing our plants. So here's the meadow as it went in. My role here was more choosing the plant selections, but I let Sarah more or less put the combinations together in the concentrations that she wanted to see them in. One of the more difficult assignments when I'm working with other designers is the designer envisions a uniform sweep of a particular plant, but if that plant is going from shade into the sun, it needs to be a plant that can handle both regimes, sun and shade. And in this case, I think we were very successful using the Sesleria Greenlee hybrid. Again, one of our best ground cover grasses. There's a great story to Sesleria Greenlee hybrid. It was a chance seedling that came from our nursery when it was down in Pomona in Southern California. And my nursery foreman at the time noticed it and said, hey, this looks different than all the surrounding other grasses. And sure enough, it was. So with years of testing, it became apparent that this really was, just like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, just right. The right height, the right texture, the right color, and really was interesting and unique. And I was very pleased. I hadn't given it a name, but our good friend Dave Frost from Native Sons Nursery was kind enough to name it after me. So thanks, Dave. Here you can see the meadow filling in. And this is sort of the awkward teenage stage. And a lot of times, this is when clients really sort of tilt their head and go like, did we make the right decision? And you really have to let people know that it's gonna look kind of spotty for its first, 60 to 90 days. But generally, meadows fill in incredibly fast. Some of the other grasses used here is the Atlas fescue, Festuca mayeri, and some of the sedges, Carex divulsa, Carex panza, There's different heights, different colors, different textures of grasses. Basically, you can step off the deck onto walk-on grasses, the Carex panza, and walk over to the house. Or of course you can take hardscape to get there if you're wearing good shoes. But the idea that you can just step right from the deck down into the meadow is something Sarah really wanted to do. The taller background grasses and flowering accent grasses offer a nice layering as you lift up with the backdrop of the fence. Here's a view. You can look out across the sweep of Carex panza and the taller Atlas fescue off to each side, and the perennials are starting to do their thing along with the flowering shrubs. I think a very clever part of the design that Sarah came up with was to have the retaining wall actually be a seat wall that you can sit on, thereby reducing the need for furniture, cluttering the whole patio up with furniture. So you can sit down around the fireplace, grab a plate of food, and enjoy your view of the meadow.